Hello scoundrels, I hope you're all doing well. I'm slowly on the mend. Those of you who've probably been following my plight with my tonsillitis that I've had. I'm slowly on the mend and I'm slowly getting better, so hopefully in the near future I'll be back to 100%. This stuff is a lifesaver, by the way. You put it in your mouth and spray it on the back of your throat. It's a lifesaver if you've got a sore throat. It's called Difflam spray. Anyway, I digress. Today we're talking about tier lists. As I said, I like to give a couple of days of the new patch before I develop a tier list. I like to ask opinions. I like to play a lot of games. I like to kind of like then also go and talk to pros and high elo players and see what they think. Of course, my opinion is not going to reflect just one source. It's going to reflect multiple sources, and this tier list is generally crafted with a bit of thought. So if you like the content, feel free to drop me a like and a subscribe and a comment about what your thoughts are. I do usually get a lot of discussion. A lot of people disagree and agree with the tier list, and that's completely fine. I'm totally okay with that. You know, I think a tier lists at the end of the day are opinion, but some opinions are just more correct than others. Anyway, I hope we can kind of go through this, and I hope this is useful to you. Remember, you can win with pretty much anything, but the higher elos that you go, these tier lists are going to become more important as you'll start to understand what is really strong in the meta and what is best for your teams and kind of what suits the best in the team comps. So again, I hope this tier list is helpful. Let's go through it, starting with the Baron lane. Okay, welcome to the Baron lane, and I use Olaf as my intro, and really he hasn't changed much. He's still incredibly strong. Some of you might be wondering why Kennen is still an S+, despite the nerfs that he had on the previous patch. Well, Kennen's still good. Kennen is not broken good, but he's still good. I mean, I know I put S+ as broken, but I previously put Kennen in like S++ tier. What Kennen provides for the team in terms of ultimate and utility, despite the small damage nerfs that he received, he's still insanely good in most team comps and will still scale well. The ultimate, you can't replace that ultimate in a team fight. It's like an elongated Amumu ultimate that deals damage over time, and generally deals more damage than the Amumu ultimate as well. It's just a good ultimate, and it's very difficult to replace that. So Kennen is still an incredibly strong pick. You may find that he is now a little bit weaker into some of his counter matchups, like the Malphite, like the Gragas, the Camille. Those types of matchups might be a little bit harder for him, but if you can navigate the laning phase, what Kennen provides for your team is absolutely unparalleled, and I think will continue to be unparalleled until we add more champions to the game that can effectively deal with Kennen. Olaf, still super strong, didn't get nerfed in the last patch. It's not going to change his position. He's still an incredibly good top laner, Baron laner, and also incredibly good in other roles as well. I think Gragas, Camille, Akali, and Malphite are all very, very solid Baron laners. I then think Darius, Fiora, Wukong, Garen, and Yasuo are all good as well. The only reason that they're a little bit lower is they are generally either more one-dimensional, so like Fiora, more of a split pusher, or they are a little weaker in the Baron lane, like the Wukong, weaker in the Baron lane than he is in the jungle. Or Darius or Garen, who can be effectively dealt with and countered relatively easily. And then going down the tier list, you obviously have the likes of the Nasus, the Mundo, Vayne and Singed are not particularly strong right now. Jarvan, even despite the buffs, still not super strong. I think maybe I might be sleeping on Jarvan just a little bit. I have seen him do really well in the jungle, but you know, I think there were very small buffs given to Jarvan, so I don't think it's made him excellent. And Jax was really only given buffs for very specific counter matchups. And honestly, that hasn't changed his kind of like overall top lane or Baron lane presence massively so. And of course, it would not be an Excoundrel tier list without reminding you that Tryndamere is hot garbage, and if you play him, you should be ashamed. I'm just kidding, Tryndamere mains. You guys are alright, really, when you're not constantly split pushing or just dying in every team fight. Okay, let's go into the jungle. As I said, Olaf super strong right now. I think he is kind of head and above the rest of the junglers at this point in time. His early game skirmishing is great, his clear speed is ridiculous, and he has a really strong mid game and can snowball really hard. So I think just Olaf, for me, is just the best jungler when piloted correctly. Lord knows I've had some awful Olafs on my team, but you know, a good Olaf I think is just the best jungler right now. Obviously, Lee Sin got a little nerf in the last patch, but Lee Sin is still strong. I think you can still play him very effectively in the jungle. His mobility is unparalleled, and so just having a jungler with that kind of mobility is obviously an incredible facet for the team. So I would not expect Lee Sin to drop off this tier list anytime soon, just because of the way his safeguard works and how different it is compared to League. Shyvana, Evelynn, Vi, Wukong, and Amumu, all good junglers. I think Amumu is just on the cusp of being in A tier because his early game can be a little weak, but other than that, I still think he's a strong jungler that can provide stuff to the team. I think then Xin Zhao, I've moved Jarvan up because I've really seen some Jarvan start to pop off on this last patch, just from the jungle specifically though, not as much in the Baron lane. Graves and Gragas. Gragas is an okay jungler, obviously better piloted in both Baron lane and mid lane though. Jax, Mundo, and Yi. I put Mundo on here because I have played some Mundo jungle. I think Mundo's good. I think he's got good early dueling. I think he's got good early clear speed. But Mundo's quite easily countered. You know, all it takes is one Morellonomicon or one Executioner's Cooling, and Mundo feels a little bit useless. So just be aware that Mundo's good. He's decent, but he's not exactly comparative to the rest of the junglers on this list, I think. Tryndamere is slightly better in the jungle, in my opinion, than Baron lane, because you can kind of sneak objectives and you can clear really well. And I have seen some Camille jungles, but she's got quite a slow clear speed, so she's got to be a little careful playing Camille. And her ganks can be a little hard to pull off because, you know, to actually land a hook shot is quite difficult from the jungle. So yeah, Camille is not the best jungler in the world. So yeah, this is the jungle tier list. I think Olaf really just reigning supreme right now, but there are a lot of like S tier junglers that can be played in the current meta. Alright, we're going to look at the mid lane now and talk a little bit about those little mid lane champs, the mages that everybody loves. And yes, Orianna for me is just kind of like head and shoulders above a lot of the other mid lane champions right now. I think I generally tend to see an Orianna in every single game that I play. She's got quite strong late game damage. She scales really well. She's got good wave clear. It just takes one item to kind of get her online. And so that's why I think Orianna is just kind of like the best mid lane pick. I used to have Aurelion Sol up there, but I have started to notice that with a lot of the other buffs and nerfs, Aurelion Sol's dropped off, but Orianna has not. So Aurelion Sol's priority has dropped a little bit, but Orianna's has not. So Orianna remains in S+. And Aurelion Sol is still a good pick, but there are other good picks to consider in the mid lane. So Corki, I think Corki is actually insane right now in the mid lane. I think he scales incredibly well. I think he does a crap ton of damage. I think Corki, those buffs have made him a very, very viable mid lane pick. The only problem with Corki is that he does kind of need to get to level 9 to start to feel any of those buffs. So his early game is relatively similar to the way it was before. Twisted Fate buffs have really elevated him. I think Twisted Fate is now a very popular pick and he's seeing a lot more play. And I think people are starting to realize how useful his ultimate is in terms of impacting the map. Kennen, I still think is better in Baron lane, and the nerfs to his laning phase have definitely hurt his mid lane and the way he plays against a lot of the other mid lane champions. However, again, nothing can replace that ultimate. That ultimate is still incredibly good. Even with the nerfs, that ultimate is still an insane addition to a team fight. So I still think Kennen remains a very high priority pick for that regard. I was considering putting Ahri down in A tier, but I still think Ahri has her place. I still think I see a lot of Ahri players. She's still great at roaming. She has a lot of individual pick-off. I've dropped Gragas down to A tier, mainly because I think he's getting outclassed by some of the other mid laners right now, and I'm generally seeing more of Gragas in the Baron lane because he has some better matchups up there. So yes, Gragas down in A tier. Zed and Yasuo, like I'm always tempted to put Yasuo higher, and especially with the buff, I could think about it. I think in coordinated team play, Yasuo is really good, but I think in solo queue, it can be quite difficult because he doesn't quite have the same kind of impact that a lot of the other mid laners do in terms of just pure impact in team fights or kind of like roaming the map. Like Aurelion Sol, Twisted Fate, Kennen, and Corki, they can all either play from range or have immediate impact in a team fight, whereas, you know, Yasuo is one of those picks that you need to pop off really hard to carry a game solo, and that's why I kind of like rate him a little bit lower than maybe some of the other mid laners. Of course, Zed did get nerfed with the recent Ghostblade nerfs, and obviously he's been on the receiving end of a couple of nerfs for a few patches now, so Zed definitely dropping down a little bit in priority. Akali, I think she's better in Baron lane for the most part. I think she has some bad matchups in the mid lane, so I think Akali's better in the Baron lane. You may be wondering why I've put Ziggs in A tier. Given that I absolutely shat on him for like several patches in a row, I've been seeing a lot of Ziggs being picked up in solo queue, and he does a lot of damage. I think what the problem was previously is I don't think people were building Ziggs right. I now think people have kind of figured out how to build Ziggs, and I'm seeing a lot more Ziggs. Now, I don't think he's as impactful as some of the S tier champions, but I also don't think he's as bad as I was making out before. People have kind of figured out A, how to build Ziggs, and B, like how to play around and use Ziggs correctly. And I think Ziggs is kind of a little bit sleeper. I think he's finally getting his spotlight, and I know a lot of Zig mains will be happy about that, because I've seen so many people saying I've been smurfing with Ziggs and grinding the ELO really, really hard. So yeah, I think Ziggs is definitely up there. Fizz is okay. Evelyn mid has definitely dropped off massively in priority. I think people have kind of realised that they'd rather just play Evelyn in the jungle. If you can't insta-clear the first wave and invade, they'd rather just play Evelyn in the jungle. Annie and Lux, they're okay picks. Like, they're decent. They're nothing special. And Lulu, I don't recommend playing her in mid lane, mainly because I recommend playing her in support. But I know some people do like to play Lulu mid, which is why I've put her here. I think Lulu mid requires a much more coordinated team. And that, you know, carrying as a Lulu mid from your own right when you don't have a hyper carry to work with is a bit Alright, let's move on to the AD carry tier list. I still use Ezreal for the intro. Unfortunately, Ezreal did get nerfed massively, but I can't be bothered to change the intros. Okay, S+, Kai'Sa, definitely 100%. I think I see her in every single game that I play. Kai'Sa is very strong. Misfortune. Now, some of you might be looking at Misfortune and thinking, why is she above Jinx? Because Jinx is clearly really strong. Well, this is an individual tier list. If I was doing a bot lane duo tier list and I could list a Jinx with Lulu as a duo, S+ for sure. But as an individual pick, if you don't have the Lulu, Misfortune outshines Jinx in most scenarios. She's much more of a lane bully, she can snowball a lot harder, and she doesn't take time to scale that Jinx does. However, Jinx is an S tier because she is a good pick, but she really shines when paired with Lulu. So I think Jinx Lulu is an insane lane right now, and if I could have Jinx with Lulu attached, she'd be S+ 100%. But I think as an individual pick, Misfortune is slightly better. Draven is starting to drop off in priority. People have kind of figured out if you just don't die to Draven, you play safe, wait for ganks, or just find the right time to engage. Draven doesn't snowball, and he kind of feels useless compared to some of the other AD carries above. Ashe is slowly creeping up in priority. I'm seeing a lot more Ashe now. I think people are starting to realize her ultimate is insanely good, and kind of like she scales well with the Blade of the Ruined King build as well. The Ghostblade nerf hurt Jhin. His build paths are kind of clunky right now. He doesn't come online as quickly as he used to. Like, the GA nerf and the Ghostblade nerf did hit him rather hard. So Jhin is like a good pick, but not insane. Ezreal and Corki. Like, Ezreal is still a great pick. I've still seen Ezreal do well, but he's kind of in the same place he has been for the last couple of patches. He's okay. Corki is decent, better in mid lane. I think the reason I like Corki in mid lane more than AD carry is because he really requires that level 9, so the solo experience helps him get there quicker. When you're in a duo lane, you share experience, and so Corki scales a little bit slower in terms of levels, and that kind of makes him a little bit less priority. Tristana is good, guys. Like, people have been hating on Tristana, but she is good. I don't think she's as good as some of the S tier and S+ tier picks, clearly, but I think Tristana is a decent pick. The buffs definitely helped her. They haven't made her insane, but they definitely helped her. Varus and Vayne. Vayne is, I hate it when people pick Vayne. Her laning phase is atrocious. Her team fights are only good if you've got the team to protect you. Her short range makes her very vulnerable to a lot of the threats in the meta right now. And Varus also feels a little underwhelming, although I do think people are starting to realise Varus's ultimate is pretty good as well, the same reason that they realise Ashe's are. And I put down those guys in C tier because Kennen AD carry I see get picked, but please never freaking pick Kennen AD carry. It's a complete waste. I see Teemo played in the AD carry position, and I think Teemo is kind of alright, but I don't think he's insane. And I see Ziggs picked up in that position too sometimes, but very, very infrequently. Alright, finally onto the support tier list. This is a little bit easier to do. There is clearly two supports that are kind of standing out right now, Lulu and Alistar. They didn't get nerfed on the last patch, so they're going to remain where they were. I think people have started to play less Janna now. I think she's dropping off in priority, and that has been because of the rise of things like Sona and Nami. I was a little harsh on Nami last update, and I think a lot of people told me off for it. I do think Nami is a good pick, and I think Nami is slowly creeping up in priority. I just don't think she's as good as Lulu, Alistar, or Braum. Braum is on his own in S tier because he's better than the A tier champs, but he's not quite as good as the S+ tier champs. And so I think Braum's really strong. I think he's even stronger in competitive and organised play, but I just don't think he's as good as Lulu and Alistar as an individual pick for the most part. I think the A tier picks are all really strong, like Janna, Sona, and Nami. They're all getting a lot of play right now. They're all being played quite a lot, but I just don't think I don't think they're as good as some of the picks above them. And Seraphine is there too. Blitzcrank has been bad ever since they nerfed his hook width range. Lux is okay. You do need to land your binding though. Soraka I've played, and honestly, she just feels like a worse version of Sona, so probably, avoid picking her. Gragas is a good counter matchup into Alistair, but for the most part, he's better played in other lanes. And I put Malphite and Annie down in C tier because they are level 5 supports, and I don't really like level 5 supports because you just don't do anything before level 5, and that's where those guys kind of struggle. Plus their gold income is severely stunted, and so they don't really have the same kind of output that they would have done in other roles. Okay, that is my tier list, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I know tier lists can be a little controversial, but this is my best stab at the tier list 2 days after the patch. Things might change, clearly. I will update this if things do change in a big way, but this is my 2 days following the patch tier list, and I think it's relatively accurate, so hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, feel free to subscribe. It would mean a lot. I'll see you soon.